Is Tipper? Yes, Tipper's online. Yeah, who else have we got there? Okay, thank you. And the first order of business is a Karakia. Thank you. Adam.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Whakataka te hou ke te uru. Whakataka te hou ke te tonga. Kia mā kena kena ke uta. Kia mā taratara ke tai. Kia he ake ana te ata kura. Kia tō, kia hoka, kia hou hu, te hei mauri ora.
Thank you. And Wazza, we've got some new persons in the room this morning. We'll just have the health and safety statement, I thought. So, please.
Good morning. In the event of an emergency or a siren sounding, please evacuate the building. The nearest fire escape is through the doors you came in on your right-hand side. If you see a blue light, please listen to staff instructions. That is the duress button, and we will likely lead you into the councillors' lounge.
Thank you. Call for apologies. Are there any apologies? Thanks. I note that he's an alternate, so do we need to record alternates? No. Okay. Is it Thompson? Sure. Is Peter? Peter is not a member of the committee. No, only committee members can give their apologies. So if there's Keith Martin is the alternate to Councillor. Oh, sorry, I should Councillor Eugene Patterson. He gave me his apologies. He's in Australia. So Keith Martin is the alternate for Waikato District.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Almost will have to leave at 12 for a funeral. Thank you.
Thank you. For early departure. Someone happy to move those apologies and lateness? Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Sid. All in favour? Carried. Thank you. Next item is confirmation of the agenda. So we've got the agenda as printed. There is one request from a member to have an issue relating to environmental natural hazards, but I've talked with that member and there is an opportunity, I believe, under the LTP, I think it is on page 14. Thank you, that it could be addressed, or even in paragraph 31 of the agenda. So we'll note that that's an addition, but it may well be dealt with as we go through. So I'll move that the agenda be confirmed. Someone second. Thank you, Chris. All in favour? Carried. So just before we get, just before we get into anything further, perhaps I'll just go back to the chair's apologies. The chair's comments. Firstly, welcome to Michelle and Maxine. Maxine is from Department of Conservation. Some of you may know of her. Oh, sorry, Michelle. Michelle, I was thinking Michelle. I was looking at Michelle. And Maxine is from Hamilton City Council, and some of you may wonder why Hamilton City Council is here. But from time to time, there are some major issues under this committee that have happened in the past. I just look at the golf club issue at Horsham Bounce Golf Club, where there were major issues on the border of the city in the Waikato district. So very important that Hamilton knows what this committee is up to, and this is a conduit that we can work through the political wing. So thank you both for attending, and some of you may know Michelle for her current work in the, dare I say it, Waikari West issue. That's there will be a positive statement later in the meeting. Thank you. So there's also matters that have been brought to my attention since the last meeting in relation to permitted activities. Just to confirm that council, I think 3 directors have met with some of the landowners here and others, and all those comments have been taken on board. and the council is looking at the freshwater rules at the moment, and subsequently there will be changes to the regional plan. And so the permitted activities are part of that review, and it's very much a time where the members here and the community gets involved in what they ask council in relation to permitted activities and whether that's expanded. So I think if anyone wants more on that, I can talk to them at the end of the meeting, but I think it's under control. Yep, no, that's fine.
Do we need to set up in the long meeting?
It's not a long-term plan issue. I've talked with senior staff about that. So it's not a long-term plan issue. It's, can you turn your mic on when you're speaking so the people online can hear? So the question is, do we need to raise it at the LTP? And I've been with the senior staff. It's not a long-term plan issue. It's the freshwater review and the regional plan review, which is your comments. You've met with I think 3 directors. So those comments have been taken on board and will be put into the mix of work in progress. So Bruce is actively working on that. You met with Bruce, and that will be part of it. And then there'll be further opportunities for yourself and others. It's not a one stop and it's done. There will be a lot more work to go, and you will be involved in that, invited to be involved in that anyway. Yep, push the red button, make it red on the right-hand button. Yep.
Okay, we just want to make sure that we, maybe through, our drainage and things that we don't miss out on full consultation with us. That's the biggest thing. And what's the time frame of this review?
My understanding from talking to the city staff, it will be up to 2 years. And of course, with the new government, the council is waiting for new directions which have been indicated. So we don't know what the regime is that we're going to be operating and working towards. So it's not on hold. There's still work being done, but there's just a little bit slower at the moment, waiting for those RMA directions to come out. And I think the terms of reference that we've got there on page 3 under paragraph 2, other matters impacting on the operation, maintenance and renewal of flood protection and land drainage infrastructure with the above schemes. And I think I've highlighted B as well, land drainage activities undertaken by the drainage district. So I think there's some scope if we need to, but the real issue is to get involved in that freshwater review, as the staff have indicated.
Okay, well, just so everybody's informed, what I'm trying to get a proposal, and it's all about saving costs, and it is to get all the flood protection, all the drainage assets and maintenance and all the stuff to be under permitted activity, so that we don't have to go through all this resource consent stuff, which Mr. Peters here could allude to the cost, like hundreds of thousands of dollars just to replace pumps that are there. And we're trying to find out what the process is to get into the required plans, to push for permitted activity for all the stuff that was pre-91, really, before the RMA came in. And so we just don't want to miss the opportunity. And I thought it was a long-term plan, but obviously it's not, it's somewhere else. But so just keep in mind that, this our turn will come, and we got to push for this. We're not asking to break any laws. We're just saying the whole thing's about reducing costs.
All right.
Thank you.
I'll go to Greg. Thank you.
Just for the assurance of the committee, we're not waiting for 2 years to get involved in this process. We already have an ongoing piece of work where we connect with our policy people to start to talk about what we do in the field, some of the challenges that we currently see, so we can get that discussion going.
Can we be part of that, Greg? Rather than come in later, can we as a group be part of that?
All right. Adam, did you?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We met with the policy staff yesterday, and we confirmed, confirming the Chair's comments, that the government has deferred the timing of the freshwater review by another 3 years. So we were running to a 24 timeframe. Now I think it's running to a 27. So we have time, 18 months to 2 years, to work on how we want to build that picture and do the submission. So we will advise further to this committee what that process looks like.
All right.
No,
And then Brendan.
yeah, I'll have a little bit to say on there. Sitting in the meetings that myself and Noah sat in with Tracy and Brent and who was the, and Greg
And Chris.
and Chris, there was an agreement in the end that, I don't know if you took part in any of the sector meetings last year, but flood protection and drainage would become a part of that. So you'd have your representation to speak on those freshwater policies. So you're not getting shut out. It's already been assessed that you are a stakeholder and you need your own representation there. So it's covered, okay?
Yeah. It's hard sometimes with history to actually.
Just, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for clarity for everyone in the room. So RMA came in 1991. At what time, what was the timeline that it became necessary to obtain a permit to do the work that Trevor's talking about? Was it 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 1991? When did it actually come to pass that we need a consent for that normal activity?
I'm going to go to Greg.
It depends what you mean by normal activity. So a lot of the work we do is already permitted. So a lot of what we do is permitted. There are some instances where we do require consents, and we have comprehensive consents that have been in place for a number of years. Probably the most recent changes were the 2020 NES, freshwater changes that came through. And those are the ones that we've been working through over the last, probably intensively over the last year to navigate. Those will be the latest changes. But look, there's a variability in terms of how our activities are covered by the existing planning requirements.
I think it's fair to say, Brendan, there's been gradual change over time. And yeah. All right, so those are my comments. And so now we've got down to disclosures of interest. Has anyone got anything to declare? No? Thank you. Confirmation of the minutes of 28 November. I haven't got a copy with me for some reason. I've left on my desk. So is there anyone got anything that they have a comment? Otherwise, someone prepared to move that. Thank you, Robbie. Is there someone to second the minutes true and correct record? Thank you, Sid. That looks like a finger going up. All those in favour? Against? Carried. So out of that, we've got the issues and actions on page 8.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So these are the issues and actions that were raised at the last meeting prior to Christmas. So there are 4 items on there for recording, and the update and the current status and where those actions are at, I'll take as read, Mr. Chairman. So the first one's to do with the vessel naming. The second one is regarding the koi carp damage to the assets and the monitoring in place to cover that. The infrastructure strategy is on the papers for later today for discussion. And also we've just discussed the 4th one there around the regulatory framework and the opportunities for the committee to be involved in that. So I'll leave it there, Mr. Chairman, and happy to take any questions.
I'll just add to that. After the first item there, staff did some detailed work in the naming of the vessel, took on board the comments that came forward from this committee. Some research was done. The name Caesar Roos was promoted. Caesar Roos, as it turns out, named many of his vessels with Maori names. And I was talking about this with my wife, and she remembers the Ringaroori and others because we live on the Waipawa River, just up from Naroa. And I do remember those boats here down on the sand. So long story short was that Waikato Tainui were approached. They passed it on to, I think, the hapu, and working with that, the staff have come back to us with a name, and I'm sorry I cannot pronounce it, but it's spelled T-E-I-A-R-O-A. Greg, can you help me out with the pronunciation, please?
Sure. So the name is Te Iaroa. It's a name that's particularly special for the Mercer area, which is the home of the vessel, and it means the long current.
Which reflects the river, and that name is very much used up in the Mercer area where Caesar Roos was based. So that, I believe, is being welded onto the hull and the cabin probably today. So that's what it is, and the construction starts on the moorings later this year. So any questions on those 4 items? It's really an update of where we've got to. Thank you. All right, into the business part of the program. Oh, you want to move in a second to receive the report on the actions? Thank you, there, Campbell and Matthew. All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. There's someone here who's keeping me honest. Now, behind us, it's probably not on the program, but I thought it was worthwhile. You've all heard about fish-friendly pumps, and council has moved to start installing them. There's some long work been undertaken. I'm not sure whether I should be telling the story or whether Adam or Greg, but I'll try and start. But long story short, there's been a huge program with universities. McEwan's the gentleman on the right, I think is the manager or managing director of McEwan's New Zealand. And the thing that he's holding in his hand is a new pump, which is fish friendly. And the eel that's been shown there is 1.2 metres long. That was the pump was installed, I think, on the Monday. We had the opening on the Friday, and to monitor the success or failure of the pump, a net was attached to the outlet, and this was removed a few days later from the net. So essentially, it passed through that pump on the right, much larger than that, of course, and that's the outcome. So, as far as fish friendly goes, that's a big eel. And that's, I'm not, perhaps you could give us, one of you give an outcome, cost, a lot of the cost has been covered by others, but I'll leave it over to you, Greg.
Yeah, so this is a part of the work stream of our Pathways to the Sea project, which is generally looking at how we work towards downstream fish passage. You'll be aware of a couple of our larger projects involving the installation of Archimedes screw pumps recently, which also provide for safe downstream fish passage. The idea with this particular work stream was how can we make our existing pumps, how can we improve their performance with regard to fish passage, and therefore have a much more cost-effective solution, which means we can, whip out the old pump, put in a new pump, and not have to deal with all of the civil works that comes with installing the new Archimedes screw pumps. So the pump that you can see, and I'll get a model down here actually so you guys can have a look at it. It's basically lift out and put in, similar size. You can see the design there. Here we go. But basically, it's replacing the impeller and the insides with something that resembles more of a Archimedes screw. So the impeller looks like that. It was a project that was funded through Callaghan Innovation and McEwan's with Waikato Tainui as well, contributing to the project development and research. So a real nice collaborative project. And it's been thoroughly tested through from, small size to full size prototypes at Auckland University to make sure that we expect to get some good outcomes. And this example was the 1.2 metre resident eel gave that outcome, and I believe completely unscathed. So it's really something else. Our research is going to be ongoing because we do want to make sure we have some good solid research to back up this. The pump size is our most common pump across the schemes, but McEwan's are certainly looking at larger pumps as well. So yeah, really positive outcome.
Really great that it's a New Zealand product and we're not having to go overseas to source them. So Matthew, can you use your mic, please?
Was there any drop off in the efficiency of the pumping?
I couldn't answer specifics, but I know that, the hydraulic performance of the pump is a critical success factor alongside the fish friendliness. So a lot of work has been done to make sure they can still obviously move the water as in terms of what's expected, because they are intended to effectively replace an old pump with a new pump, so they still need to provide that performance. They are rotating at a slower speed as well. So I guess there will be efficiencies in that.
Well, I just thought that would be worthwhile showing because it's directly in our area. And it's, I think, all parties should be congratulated on getting, the early results here look very promising. So, Brendan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Greg, just to further to Matthew's point, so the volume performance of the pump won't be affected in most situations, do you think?
It's designed to be consistent with the pump it's replacing.
Thank you. And further, would you need a consent to change that part of the infrastructure in a normal?
It would depend on the situation. I couldn't speak in detail to that.
Thank you.
That's the issue that Trevor's trying to address in his concerns that, like for like, and this is a better product. So we all, let's not relitigate it, but that's, but anyway, that's something I wanted to highlight to you that, there are some success stories that we should share them. All right, so to the works report, and I turn it over to Adam. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the works report you have before you on page 9 follows our the format that we used at the previous meeting, and it just summarises the operational and capital work program on the year to date, including some financials. I will hand over to Sarah Leland, who's our zone manager for Lower Waikato. Also got Reuben Mills to speak to the land drainage elements, and we've also got Brendan Manning just sitting at the back there just to help with any operational aspects, depending on any matters that the members may wish further clarification on. So I'll just hand over to Sarah first to run through some highlights. Thanks, Sarah.
Hey, great. Thank you, Adam, and morning all. So I will go through
Sarah,
this.
can you just pull that closer to you, please?
Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So good morning all. I will go through just some of the key highlights, but as we go, if you have any questions, please do put your hand up and we'll do our best to answer those. So first off is the operational program, which is covered off in your reports. So a summary of this program is outlined in attachment 3. So that's on page 22 and 23 of the agenda, and it includes the current status of that operational work program. So just back up one slide. Yep.
So you're looking for questions on
Yeah,
this?
just if there's any questions before we jump onto the budget.
So I'm taking you've all read this report diligently. So any questions noted? Otherwise, we'll move on to. All right, I think we're safe to move on, Sarah.
Oh.
It's 10.
Okay, and then moving on to page 24, which is attachment 4.
Sarah, so we're trying to follow the agenda. So are these matters what's relevant to page 10, page 11, page 12? So if there's anything in the words in the pages 10, 11, 12, can you raise them as we get to them on, this is the visual, I suppose, of the words. That would be right?
Correct in that the pages have got a very high level summary of the financials and the operational program, and the attachments are where the detail are. So that's why I'm jumping to the attachments where the detail is, rather than, I guess, going through page by page, the high level detail.
You good with that, Trevor? Okay. If you're confused, put your hand up.
One matter I'd highlight for the committee in terms of attachment 3 is it provides the full scope of work that we do undertake on an operational basis. You see just how substantial that work program is, the amount of work that we need to get through, much of which needs to be concentrated into the summer season when we have the weather behaving itself. So it's a really good insight into everything that the team are doing.
So on page 13 there, just before we get into that graph, You'll note that yesterday, I think it was, the government announced it's free for all on urban sprawl again, rather than forcing everyone to go 3 by 3 in this urban areas. So you'll see more pressure once that's underway with the expansion of urban areas into our drainage. So it's a serious concern, and Robbie and I and others have talked about it within council, and during the LTP we've raised it as well. So something that needs to absolutely be addressed and is very forward to the staff's mind. So, all right, thanks, Sarah.
Okay, thank you. So continuing with the operational program, just noting there that the Lower Waikato Oversight and Information Budget as at 31st of December was 25% spent, the flood protection 38% spent, and the river management 14% spent, and that is sort of reflective of what we would expect in terms of expenditure at that time of the year. Our river management activity is under full swing now. It's often much later in the season that we deliver on that program. So then moving on to our capital program, and again, whilst this is in a high level detail earlier in the agenda, attachment 5 on page 25 to 27 outlines the capital program. And
So, Sarah, this is a little bit difficult. So it's on page 10, but you're talking about page 23. So it's just, can we just make the connect if it's not obvious to people?
sure, okay. So on page 10, you'll see the head of the operational work program midway down the page. If you look at page 10 on your agenda, paragraph 10, 11 and 12 detail the operational program, and within that it references attachment 3 where the detailed information is, which we've been looking at. So I've provided, we've talked through the status of the program, which is in the attachment, that was attachment 3, and then looking at point 11, we've also presented the detailed budget, which was on the screen previously and is detailed in attachment 4. And I've just spoken to point number 12, which is the status of what the expenditure is for that operational budget. So now we're moving on to...
So has anyone, just to stop you there, has anyone got any issues with what's on the screen?
Just a question in relation to some of these new structural things that are replacements. There's design and consenting. It'd be interesting to know just what the proportion of that cost was consenting versus design.
Yes, and that's where I'll share. If I can go to Greg, late last year, I did a request to staff, and I think I'm happy to share that paper. You'll see it was an OIA request, basically to find out really what was costing drainage and rivers to get consents and hold consents. In short, the cost of getting consents quite small from the council. It's a couple of $1,000. The work that the RMA requires to have in the background to support the consent process can be hundreds of thousands, excuse me, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that's what's imposed by the RMA. But the council structure costs are very small in the consenting process. What staff charge to get the consent, it's what the extra work is involved. And that's significant, because I know it's, for most landowners, it's the cost, everything is the consent cost. The true cost to council is the consenting fees. And I'm not trying to defend it, that's the reality of it. And I'm happy to share that paper with you. And if you've got questions, come back to me. So I'll get that circulated to all members of the committee. So Greg, you've got a comment?
I was just saying, maybe, Mr. Chairman, if we just pause that question, because that's getting into the capital program. And if there are any other questions from members around what's the detail provided in Appendix 3 and 4 on the operational program.
Okay. Right, we'll come back to that then, Craig. Okay, thanks, Sarah. Sorry, is there any other question?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, that just highlights the critical thing where we've got to get this into a permitted activity status. It's going to be a difficult one because, you know, it's the council is saying it's RMA charges that are the problem, not the council charges. But you know, we're trying to promote that existing stuff should be under permitted activity for renewal, because it is just what Mr. Chairman's saying is that yeah, the council thing is $1,000 or so. That is, you want to talk to Mike Peters, they're just in the process now. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars for all the reports and all the stuff that goes with it. And so that's, you know, that's why we have to, I know the battle we're going to have is that the council say, well, we're only charging you $2,000 or whatever, you know? But the fact is the landowners are getting charged hundreds of thousands. And so we're combining that.
Yes,
our
right.
thoughts are it's combined together. And so, you know, we have to have some leeway there.
The message has been heard loud and clear.
Yes, so there's no further questions on the operational program before I hand back to Sarah to give you an overview of the capital program. Sorry, was there operational
Just a question?
Okay.
Yeah, so probably it's a similar line. So when we're looking at the number, is that the actual cost to do the job, or is that an inclusive cost of everything of the management and the whole structure through, or is it just cost to replace a pump of the guy going to do the work, or is it the guy, you know, is it the whole right back through? You know, you got the cost put onto it. So how do you? Yeah, that's probably.
So the total cost of our capital projects is the total cost. So it's the investigation, the design, the consenting, and the execution of that project. Labour hours that go into it as well, and that is all then capitalised and recovered over time through depreciation and loan repayments.
There'll be overhead costs will be in this when we go through.
Where there's internal labour that's been used to deliver a project,
Okay.
yes.
All right. So we've got a speaking order here. So Mike, did you have a question?
I was just going to pass the comment that I think the cost of the consent, the council, I think just bringing that up is a little bit of a smokescreen, one way of putting it, because it's actually the cost of all these reports that are in behind that. And so in actual fact, that's actually a cost of the consent. You know, paying $3,000 or $4,000 to the council to get the consent is only the smallest part of it. And in my situation, we've already spent, for a water consent, we've already spent $250,000 on reports just to be able to file for the consent. And those are all costs that are actually charged by other people for information that the council should already have in their data bank. You know, and this is why I find this whole thing a bit of a BS, to be quite honest, because there's huge costs involved in getting a consent. So is that part of what we're talking about here, the cost of the consent, or just the cost that the council is charging itself for the consent?
So through you, Mr. Chair, so we have provided the total cost of the consents for our various projects. They've been undertaken, I think it was in the last 3 years. And that includes not only the costs, the administrative cost from our resource use group, but also the costs to council in terms of our labour and consultant costs to prepare the information to lodge the consent and get it through to ultimately issuing. So, for example, with the Churchill East project, which is I think it's in the order of 6 to 7 million, I think is that at the moment. So the consenting cost for that project was $39,000. And so that includes both our staff time, our regulatory costs, and the time that the costs for consultants to prepare the necessary information to inform that consenting process. So as a proportion of the overall project, it's a very small part of a $6-7 million project. The cost for consenting projects does vary widely because it depends on the environment that the project is being constructed in, the different issues that we have to deal with. For example, we have another project in the Hauraki, which is in the coastal area, and so that we're dealing with a much more complex consenting regime in that regard.
I want to open a can of worms when I told you I'm going to share the report, but move on. So there we have Brendan or Delta. Will?
Yeah, I've got a question. So the operational work program, is that the same level of service as prior years? Because looking down the line, within 1 to 3 years, there'll be, the aim is to provide less operational service for less assets. I mean, it's at the moment, you're maintaining all the assets, but going forward, you'll be maintaining some 85%, then 70%, then 60%. So is it the same level of service for all the assets as prior years?
Yes, it is, and we have a standardised approach to the asset management. So everything follows a standardised approach, and any asset that we're managing will be managed in that way. So when you have a look at that summary, you'll see that there's maybe quarterly, annual inspections and the like.
So there hasn't been any change in that program?
In what's reported in the current financial year?
Yeah, so for example,
Yes.
just something as simple as mechanical cleaning, that's once every 3 or 4 years or whatever, there's no reduction in the program.
No, there's not. The information reported there is this, well, it's the same as it was last year. We're just providing, I guess, more detail on the operational program than we have in previous committee reports. But yeah, there hasn't been a change in level of service.
Okay, thank you.
Between last year and this year. Probably 3 or 4 years back, we did make a change on how we managed our pump overhauls, and we have taken that from just like an 8-year rotation to a more inspection-based approach there. So we will, when asset, I guess, management practice shows that there's a more efficient way of doing things, we will make that adjustment. But, there's typically not, I guess, a lot of adjustment in that program.
Thank you.
All right, so we can move on. Thanks, Greg.
All right. Well, if we move on to then the capital program, so I'll work through what's in the agenda paper. So, firstly, looking at point number 3 there, just provides a summary of the program, including both major and minor capital
13,
projects.
I think.
13.
Oh, apologies, 13. And it then refers to attachment 5, which outlines the planned capital program for the 23-24 year. Of that program, the major capital works which are currently underway are the replacement vessel construction and the associated mooring. We're actually looking at commencing work on the mooring in a couple of weeks' time, so middle of March, so we can do that when river levels are lower. There's the Churchill East pump station, which is going really well, and that's very well into construction, getting much closer to completion now. And there's also the stabilisation of the Pangarehu canals. So we've got the rock works underway for that, and then later in the year, when ground conditions allow, we'll be moving into a planting program for stabilisation through there as well. So they're the 3 major capital projects. And then we've got a mix of more minor capital projects as well.
So I understand the pumps for Churchill East have been hoisted in next week, but no one is, they're reducing the number of people on site to prevent, so there's no one, we're not going to view. We had thought we would, but there's a request that no one goes on. From a distance, you might get to see it, but you won't be allowed on site. So for those, apparently it's sometime next week, not sure exactly, but anyway. It's good that it's progressing. Any questions of Sarah on those issues? All right, carry on, thanks, Sarah.
All right, so jumping on to point 14 in the agenda, that just outlines the capital program budget. We can just maybe move along a couple of slides. Yep, there we go. So with the capital renewal program, that budget is currently 22% spent, and this is as of the end of January. The capital new works budget, as at the end of January, was only 4% spent. That's actually the Pangarehu Canal works and just basically reflects the phasing of that, with that work starting. I think it was just November, December that started. So we'll see the costs continuing to come through for that, and we'll expect to expend that budget. And then we've got the Lower Waikato Shovel Ready program, which includes our vessel, and that's currently 37% spent at the moment. So were there any questions on the financials before I just jump onto a few photos which we've got there on the presentation?
So you expect that to be spent as phased by the end of the financial year? The vessel probably won't be finished by then, but.
Yeah, the vessel's sort of targeting around about August, so we won't expect that to be fully expensed this year. The capital renewals program as well, we wouldn't expect that to be fully expensed, because we do build contingency into that program, and we do also have allocations for reactive work, so that the team can quickly respond to that. So, for example, we may have a bundle of, let's say, $50,000 to $80,000 to respond to capital works for flat valves, which are unknown at this point in time. But when the team do the inspections, they find it. If they find something, instead of having to then work through a complicated process, the funds are there and they can move on it. But it means that if we don't identify issues which need a capital response, then those dollars are unspent. So with how we're tracking this far, we haven't utilised much in the way of contingency. So I am expecting an underspend on that. But in terms of the actual delivery on the capital program, as per the Q1 forecast, that is progressing really well.
All right, thanks.
Okay, and we've just got some photos here up on, which you can see up on the screens there. So the first photo there is of Churchill East construction. You can see the cofferdam which is in place, and then the work on the structure there as well. I think if we jump to the next slide, that is the screw pump being unloaded at Auckland Port. I think a lot of happy people to see that. It's getting it onto a ship, and then with obviously some of the turmoil out there, actually getting that to Auckland, was very welcomed.
So there's two of those, isn't there, Sarah?
Correct.
And just for those who don't know, the diameter of that pump?
I think it's at 3.3 metres in diameter, I think.
Big pump.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if you go to the airport and drive past Transcar's yards, you can see them sitting there, and they look a lot bigger in person than they do in a photograph, I can tell you that much.
I've known that, because I went there a couple of days ago. All right, thanks, Sarah.
Okay, and just moving on to the next photos there. So we've got the vessel. You can see from this picture, the vessel actually takes up pretty much the entire shed that it's been built on. So you can see, well, particularly for those who actually went to the visit earlier on, you can see it's progressed quite a lot. And the top of the vessel was really closed in now, whereas obviously before it was quite open. If we just move down to the next one, there's some labels. I won't read through all of those, but just pointing out what it is that you're looking at. This one here is the rear of the vessel, looking at the stern arrangements. Moving on to the next one, you can see the engine room. See, they've done quite a lot of welding since we were last there. I take it you didn't get a call, Robbie, to help out with that? No. So that's progressing really well as well. And then moving on to the next photo, you can see the hull there, fully complete and showing the anchor compartment and the towing eyes as well.
We were up there in, is that November?
Grab your mic. Sorry.
Is it November when you're up there?
October, November.
Where that hole is, where it says forward anchor, we actually walked out through there. So none of that front plate was even on the barge then.
So it is tracking really well. Herons have been doing a fantastic job. It's going really smoothly. It's all on track as per timeline. Okay, so jumping to the next photo, that's our aluminium wheelhouse, and that's advanced quite a lot now since those times when we earlier saw that. And then jumping on to the next photo, you can see the internal fit out of that wheelhouse happening as well. And I think that's it in terms of photos of our major capital
Don't make it
works.
too comfortable. They won't want to go home. Any questions?
Is there any other significant dates coming up for the barge? Like for stakeholders and ratepayers to be and go up to have a look at, if it's the day it's floated or whatever?
Yeah, well, certainly when the vessel goes into the water and starts its sea trials, obviously that's going to be quite significant. And that's probably sitting around about August. And then we have been undertaking some planning as well for the deliveries. We had the team out on the water last week having a look at the sandbar and the route through the Waikato River to Mary, because that's quite an undertaking, and just having some discussions around how that delivery is undertaken. Maybe the vessel will actually stop in Manukau Harbour and then make sure that there's some settled weather before. Obviously it's going to have settled weather moving from Whangarei into the Manukau Harbour as well, but we just need to make sure we've got a really good window, the right river levels and so forth, with coming through over the sandbar and to Mary. And obviously we need to ensure that the mooring is ready as well. So hence why we're starting work on that next week. So there's certainly a significant focus on the vessel. We obviously need to ensure all these different activities are lining up.
Any other questions? Oh, sorry, Karen.
Mr. Chairman, is there any worth reporting on how we're going to manage the operation of this thing? Staffing it? Is there any update on that?
That's operational, but if there's, I don't know. Sarah?
Yes, so as part of the process, we have been looking at options for a skipper at the moment. That would be a contracted skipper. So there's a few different options that we're looking at there, and ideally we'd be looking for that skipper to be the person who brings it from Whangarei as well. So we're working through that, but predominantly it will be contracted staff working on the vessel, like with a digger and doing the arborist work and so forth, and the skipper. It'll really just be our team who will be providing input in terms of what work need to be undertaken for that river management work. So they'll be giving some, I guess, high level direction, but it's actually the contractors who are then actually going to be doing that work.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So is that the vessel going to come all the way on its own, or is it going to be accompanied by some other vessel?
It's coming on its own.
Damn right. There's a bit of coastline they could run it on.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's positive. Thank you. Anything further?
No, I don't have anything further on the zone program. It's, I think, moving on to the, to Ruben with the drainage program now.
Ruben?
Yes, good morning. Thank you and welcome again to everybody. And I guess with land drainage, it continues. So the update really is about just the continued operations. And it's good to say, and I guess I've got a shortened version. So we're looking at page 3 as we start through there. There is some stuff up on the.
So page 11 of the agenda, page 3 at the bottom.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yes, it is. Yeah.
It's a test, Mike. It's a test.
Yep. And I guess the key thing is that, you know, the work has started, has commenced in all areas. Because of the wet weather last year, there has been some work in terms of machine clearing that's had to start early and to clean that. But the drainage program, the spray programs are substantially complete where they need to be, with the follow-up of the autumn spraying coming up. And machine cleaning where it needs to be has started early in some of those areas. So in terms of the budget, as at, I guess, when we put this together, this was sitting in end of December, we're about 57% spent. Franklin Waikato is sitting at 46 and ACAC's at about 36. So we're on track to deliver, I guess, is the key message. If we come down to I guess down to ACAC itself, where the key issues there, I guess, really is that again it's on track and we're delivering. The digger's working there, and the guys in that area know where the digger is, and it's working in its figure 8 pattern. And there's interaction there with the key landowners there all the time. Some issues with alligator weed there that are being dealt with, and there's a collaborative effort to do that in connection with the landowner, ourselves, and biosecurity. And that does affect what you can do in some of the drains, and that's district or region wide, I guess. There's some potential issues around, but that's reported and dealt with.
So you do the work with the alligator weed, or does the biosecurity team do that?
The biosecurity team does. So what we would do is we would highlight that to the biosecurity team, then we would move back from that area. Because one thing we're very conscious of is that we don't want to spread that around. So they need to come and deal with it. We don't want it on the pasture or getting transferred around the place. So yeah, our guys would pull out from that area if it was noticed, and there's an inspection done before they go in anyway. And then if there is something, machines are cleaned and there's a protocol around to make sure it's not spread. But yeah, it does get delivered across to biosecurity, who will come in and actively deal with that. Because as you're aware, it is in quite a few of the subdivisions in some of the areas around, including Matangi and Waikiri West and in various areas around through that. Yes, so I guess the other issue in ACIC was the bridge, McCarthy's Bridge around in there. So we're going through that design process. I think we've just landed the final design plans. And that's looking very positive. I'm hearing from Brendan that we're not needing to do some of the work around the abutments itself, but in doing that head wall stuff, we don't have to do that, but we're having to do a little bit more of the, I guess, the piles and that need to go into the ground to sit the abutments on. So, but that's on track, I think, for delivery, and we're not signaling any price increases. But did you want to say something about that, Brendan? Yeah, so essentially that's on track, and while we've reduced some cost for the abutments, we've actually, for the head walls, we've increased a little bit of cost in terms of the having to do the piles on that. it's on track to deliver that service, and we're looking at going to consent, lodge for consent shortly. Yeah, in terms of that. And I guess if we now come down to Franklin Waikato, I'm hearing from the teams out there that things are going well, that there's no issues there, and that they're on track for delivery of their work. Again, there's machine cleaning that has started early to clean some of the blockages from last year. So that's ongoing in terms of that.
Just pass to Greg for a moment, because we're in the area. Can you make a comment in relation to Waikiri West, please?
Yes, this is one element of the Franklin program that's had a intense effort, probably over the last 3 to 6 months especially. It is tracking well. We're planning to undertake that work in March and April, doing a lot of really good work with DOC as well to enable that work to happen. We are very close to landing the concession, which is again really positive, and aiming to get that work done as efficiently as we can.
I'm going to say something, you might get grumpy with me, Greg, but I'll say it anyway. My understanding of some quick conversations is that it's down to the very finest detail and is expected to be signed, hopefully next week, to allow the work to be done. So I'm sure you can convey that message to the appropriate people in your subdivisions there. I knew you couldn't.
Yeah. It's an ongoing saga. It's been 4 years old. Unfortunately, I think the CEO gave us an undertaking it would be done before Christmas, and Pamela gave me a quick phone call to say we were all go 2 weeks ago, and we're still not all go well.
Well, I know it's been a frustrating situation, but and we're not going to get into the details in this discussion now. But the reality is there's been good faith on both sides of the discussion, and whilst I have expressed my personal views to staff about the speed, the reality is we're closer than ever, and the work is still on track to be done this season. That will be a major achievement, and I know I've asked to be told when the first bucket goes in the ground, and I will be letting you guys know if you aren't even there yourselves. So it's just one of those things, and external parties have legislation, whatever. So it's frustrating, but good things come to those who wait.
I hope to bring up something that will solve it shortly, Mr. Chairman.
Very well. So thank you, and it might be premature, but thank you to DOC for its participation in that exercise as well. So back to you, Ruben. Oh, Robbie, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know, Trevor, you brought this to us nearly this time last year. It was the first time we sat in level 2 discussing this. It has taken a long time, and it has definitely moved forward in the last 5 months. And myself and Noel have put a lot of effort into getting us to this position now. But I want to thank Michelle and Doc for fully supporting and getting behind and helping Greg and these guys get to the decision that you're getting to next week, hopefully, and sign it off. And allowing some of these farmers that are under extreme pressure and their health and well-being is struggling because of this. So I thank you for taking it such as a high level and getting it resolved, because it needed to be sorted. So thank you for that.
By all means.
As well on that, I appreciate that it has taken some time. I think, but now we're in a position where you've got the longevity of access to that site. So this isn't just a one-off. This is the future access. It has taken time, but we've worked well. We've got there. Never an intent that the works couldn't happen. It's just making sure that we're in a way that we were comfortable to enable a long-term agreement. Yes, we're there, and a lot of work's gone.
Adam, and then I'll go back to Ruben.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. And you just want to acknowledge and thanks both parties involved. Just want to reassure the committee that this has been a priority. Staff have been working hard behind the scenes. I just want to particularly acknowledge Ruben and Brendan, who've worked hard behind the scenes, along with Michelle, to make this happen. And like you said, Mr. Chairman, we're in a much better space. We're almost there. So thank you.
Thank you, Ruben.
Cool. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, so that was a good summary on that particular issue. And I guess there, you know, as it can be read in the report, there is a lot of good work going on out there through the subdivisions, and our guys are active. They're out there with our constituent ratepayers, our landowners, talking with them on a daily basis about what needs to be done, and then putting that in the programs. Because generally our programs target for a 10% clean of drainage channels and 100% spraying of the drainage channels per year, and that's how we build up our budgets and our work programs. And that's what we reflect in here. And then, of course, you do have some areas where there has been some accelerated cleaning and some increased costs, and we've had some of that around, which is in the report. But then we do come in and out of the reserves to handle that, and you know, continue to do, because while we're doing our own drain inspections, we do rely on our landowners to contact us and give us the eyes on the ground as well. And they know, you know, where the pressure points are within the systems, whether they be at the top of the, you know, the Manawaru or in you know, Churchill East or Matangi or Te Kowhai. So we're on track to deliver across those programs, I guess, is the best place to leave at around the operational side of it. And then I guess move on to what emerging issues we have coming out of. So the graphs that we had provided there really are just a summary of the budgets and what the budget positions are, but can take them as being read, really. So if we do go down to the emerging issues, we've got those several issues, and Noel, our chairman, talked about urbanisation coming into the drainage areas, and that it continues to happen. We met earlier this week with a group that's wanting to develop an Orchard Road, so that's the Orchard Road pump station area. And through that consultation, we can make sure that we've got easements in place and whatever happens to protect those drainage areas, to ensure that the legitimacy of our drainage areas and assets are maintained. So there's some work around that where there are some areas that need to be discussed and organised and handed back to some of the TAs, I guess, where they should be sitting. But that is a bit more of a longer term process as well in terms of that. A quick update on the self-administration policy, I guess. It's a good touch point on that one. We said we would meet with the landowner representative group that was put forward by this committee last year. We did meet with them on the 12th of December, received their comments. We've also had a summary back from, I guess, their representative, which was Trevor, who came back with the comments. And I guess the key issue was that they wanted to be able to have requests assessed on a case-by-case basis rather than predetermined. So that's been taken on board. That predetermined list of 12 subdivisions has been taken out of the policy, but the risk parameters that the council would use to assess an application would remain in there as the guidance. So that policy is in the current state of being finalised with that wording through it. And then, and I guess, Greg, the process from now.
Yeah, and I guess it's a question for the subcommittee. So obviously you've had your representatives heavily involved in having a look at what's been prepared and providing feedback. The next stage would be for council to adopt that policy. The question for the subcommittee is whether or not you are comfortable to see that flow through that process from here, or whether or not you're wanting any further involvement in that. The difference being is that we'd be looking to take this policy to the April ICMC meeting, which is our next one. If we were to have to take any further steps with the subcommittee, we'd be looking at more like June, at the June ICMC meeting.
For those who don't know, the likes of Greg and myself and Robbie get together prior to these meetings and just chat through the agendas and the likes. I did suggest a way forward was, whilst the subcommittee has, or the landowner representatives have fed back, One way to do it would be to circulate it to this wider group and ask if there's any comments over the next week or 10 days so that they could be incorporated or noted before it goes to the full ICMC, Integrated Catchment Committee, which is, I think, 8 councillors where this committee feeds into, and then ultimately to council if it's a policy issue. So how do you feel about, I don't really want to delay it till June. It's 6 months away, or I don't know. No, we're 3 months away now. Rather than and then delays it to getting to the next ICM. So potentially it's late, very late in the year. Or you guys can have a look at it and feedback over the next week, 10 days. How do you feel? You happy with that? Circulate it, and if you've got any comments to feed them back through. Mike?
I'm just going to say, Mr. Chairman, I think with those changes that Ruben's made to it, I think we're pretty happy just to see it move forward. So if you send it out to everybody and then take it from there.
Okay, so on the basis that the subgroup has had a look at it on behalf of everyone, and unless there's anything, so we'll take it that we'll proceed to ICMC, but we'll circulate it. And if there's anyone got a comment, it's over to you to come back through myself or Greg. Where do you want it to Greg? Right through to Greg. Takes me out of it. That's great. And or Ruben. So we will circulate. Ruben will send it out, and it will come. Any response will be easy to go straight back to him. A reply. And do reply all to so that everyone else knows what your comment is, please. Okay, that's done deal. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess from a land drainage perspective, the message is that the guys are out there working, they understand what they're doing, the work programs are going well, they're dealing with issues as they come up, and those were the emerging issues around urbanisation and self-administration, really. So if there's any questions, we could take those.
Just so you know, I'm working to a 12 o'clock lunch, guys. Any questions, Brent, of Ruben? That's a good. Oh, Trevor.
Just one, Ruben. On the, I'm not sure if it's in this area, but on the flaps, on the flaps of the pump outlets, I've had discussion before where the 3 monthly asset check has occurred, and I was wondering whether that has been a bit of a failure. And we've talked about giving that role to, you've got a sustainable engineer or some sort of engineer that does the pump stations on a routine basis. Has there any been discussion of giving that the flap 3 monthly routine to him? Because I see, ours are up for replacement, but a lot of the issue has been is, to be fair, the asset check has not been done up to a suitable standard. And so the idea why it's a 3 monthly asset check is because it's so important. And I've talked to Adam about this, but I found the solution would be, to give it to the guy that's got the experience and the qualification to, and the experienced eyes to look at it. And he's at the pump anyway, and the flaps are only 40 metres away type of thing. And so has there been any more talk about giving him the role rather than at the moment, the role is basically given to the untrained eyes of the local staff. No criticism on them whatsoever, but it's not the right eyes looking at it. So the system has been breaking down. Has there been any more movement on giving that guy the job?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chairman, I think Greg's got a comment to make as well, but I understand we have actually had conversations. We're talking about Steve Hall, who's our reliability engineer. So he does go around and he does do some checks on the performance of our assets. And so Steve is very qualified, very experienced. We also, I agree, we do need to bring our younger teams, our more experienced staff members up to speed, and we do look at those opportunities, and we try and bring that those learnings through to the team, so they do spot those defects or those things that are degrading before they do become a defect and causes those assets to fail. So it is work in progress. I know I've talked about it with Brendan as well, just to how we can maybe make that more formal or cement it into the works that we do. But our teams are, they are qualified themselves. They are, coming up to speed for some of them, but we do have experienced staff also that support Steve in his work. And remembering too that Steve, it's a level of detail, I guess, that we're required here too, because Steve does cover the whole region, including the Hauraki, and looking at all of our assets, performance, and asset conditions. So, but I do take your point on board, Trevor.
It might be a good position for a cadet that we talked about. Steve will drop off his perch one day, and you've got to follow through, haven't you?
So we've got the comment from Sarah.
Yeah, so this is one that we picked up last year as a team, and alongside Steve Hall, Brendan, myself, and the work supervisors, we came together and we actually spent a number of hours just working through all the different aspects which were affecting the floodgate, because I guess inspection frequency is one aspect, but there's actually quite a few different aspects. And when I was talking it through with the guys, it became apparent that there were just so many considerations, such as, fitting, some of this, some of it to, I guess the older structure in itself can be problematic. So we documented all of this, and I am going to pick it back up with the team and just sort of work through actioning things. Just our time at the moment has been on long-term plan and other matters, but we have had a deep dive into it. We've looked at some initial aspects. Steve's feedback was he actually thought that the guys were doing a good job during the quarterly inspection, but I think it's just the complexity of all these other aspects which are going on. I don't know, Brendan, if there's anything, I don't want to put you on the spot, that you want to add there, but it's certainly something that we're aware of, and we are, I guess, we have taken some actions already, such as ensuring that we've got capital budget available so that the guys can be really responsive when they see an issue to getting that fixed. They don't have to go through a process. Obviously, we've taken on board the feedback that we've had around that alternate design, which has obviously gone in at Mary now, so that we don't have the same issue, with having the, obviously additional locking mechanisms and that with it falling off. So yeah, there are, I guess it's fair to say, there are some complexities with it. We're aware of it, and some of them are shorter term, some of them are long term. Like the team have been following up to see if there's some standard spares available through suppliers, and so there's quite a few things we're working on there, but it is going to take us time working through. But yeah, it's certainly a priority for us, and we're well aware of it.
I think the main thing is staff have taken it on board, Trevor, so we'll park that one.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, can I add to that? I guess also we see it as a golden opportunity to upskill guys so that we're bringing this sort of training and skill. We've got very skilled guys out there that are able to pick up on these issues, so it's an opportunity to bring that in-house. That keeps our costs under control and gives our guys the opportunity to lift their game as well, and they're responding to it well.
Thank you. Maxine.
Kia ora, Ruben, thanks for your reporting. On page 13 on your emerging issues, you highlight the urban development into council administered land drainage. And in light of the minister's recent announcements and potential for fast tracking some of that development, especially around the outskirts of Hamilton, how is this committee placed to be able to advocate to the minister about the impacts that might have on the wider system?
Robbie, do you want to?
I'll be meeting with some ministers on Monday night, and I'll be totally explaining it to them that how this is going to affect that you're after a level of service that we can't provide. And so you can't, there shouldn't be development there until you can meet the level of service that you require. So you'd have to take over the assets to provide the service, because we can't.
But that then is complications, because we've got a prime example, say, for example, at Te Kowhai, which I'm very familiar with because I live out there. District Council was warned by the region that the proposed subdivision was in an area that ponded. Building heights should be considered. District Council ignored that. And now we have a subdivision that whenever there's even a reasonable downfall, the roads become streams. The drainage channels were, instead of being in straight lines, they were put around sections. So you've got water going all over the way. And of course, then you've got the concern of getting that water away. And then you've got the rural community who's paying for a level of service that has that water going within 3 days. The urban area wants it gone within, now. And so whilst the turning it back to the territorial authorities, such as the city or the district, to deal with that problem, the water's still got to go somewhere, and the rural ratepayers are not going to pay for a service that they don't need. So that's the conflicts that we have, and this is mirrored all across the Karakia and Waikato districts in particular. So while it's in theory good, give it back to the TAs, it's their problem. The rural community has also got to be kept in mind, because they're the ones that are producing food that the urbanites need to eat. So it's not easy, it's complex. So very much aware of it. But again, Robbie, is on a political aspect, but as an organisation, I don't know, Greg, do you want to respond in relation to an organisation? Ruben, can you give him a button?
Yeah, I guess need to come off so you can go on, I guess.
Yeah, and just for the assurance of the committee, so there's a particular part of our work program, council involves itself in many consultation processes when government is looking to adjust or introduce new rules. Part of that process is reaching out across the organisation where there may be impacts and bringing together that feedback for a whole of council view on proposals, and that will often include hazards, regional land drainage and flood protection, and being cognizant of those kind of impacts.
That help you?
Thanks very much, Noel.
Did you want to add to that, or Craig's got a question?
Yeah, just for you, Noel, Chairman. We've got this integrated catchment approach that's been promoted, and I think it's a very good thing. But whether it's town or rural or whatever, it's all part of the same water system.
Yes.
So the integrated catchment approach needs to be taken, and I've always been a fan of the principle of the costs falling where they should. So that the principle of the food producer that's just down from them isn't getting a whole lot more water dumped on them, and if there is, the cost should be borne by those that are having the impact, that are causing the impact.
Absolutely, and like we have the urbanisation, the port of development at Te Rapa that utilise the Mangaheka stream, which goes 9 kilometres from Te Rapa through to the Waipa. And I'll declare a conflict of interest because I'm the last one on that stream before it hits the river. But that has not been, in my view, successful. Then, so this predecessor, the Waikato Central Drainage Committee, lobbied for better outcomes within that process, but the learnings from that were taken across when the Tainui wanted to build the inland port, and the proposal was to put all the drainage into the Comac stream. And for those of you who don't know, the Comac stream starts in the Hillcrest and ends up at Taupere, and it's flat all the way through there. So to put if you look at that acreage, there's a couple of hundred acres, I think, or hectares or whatever it is now, and you urbanise that and put hard stand and roofs and everything else, that volume of water that would have normally settled in the ground and made its way was suddenly going to be huge volumes. But the work that the committee did with the city, it turned the water back into the city and now goes to the Waikato River. So there's learnings, and it may be, it's a few years now, but there's some practical learnings that came out of that. And going forward, those learnings need to be worked with the appropriate territorial authority to ensure the outcomes for the city's district and the rural ratepayers. So it's something that Robbie and I are very much aware of, and we've got our eyes on it. So, Adam.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just further to that, that's a really good question. So my team and I have been quite intentional around just while the strategic conversations happen, we've also got to think about we've got current issues, and so what do we do operationally? So we are meeting frequently now, more so with Waikato District Council. You've got to look across the planning spectrum and right across the technical hydraulic spectrums as well, and also with our Hamilton City Council and of course the other districts across the region too, where we do know where urbanisation or any land use change that may affect our drainage network. And so we're trying to sort of be proactive about it rather than wait for it to become a major problem. So we're just in that sort of balancing act at the moment. But yeah, but thanks for raising. It was a good question. Thank you.
It also came up when the Greenway was done for Rotakari, going out to Rotakari Lake, so I was involved heavily in that, submitted on behalf of the committee, and we were, as committee members, involved in that. So we do keep our eye out and get involved where we can. So, yeah. Ruben.
Just to continue on, Mr. Chairman, so we do have a process where any applications that come through over a certain size, we get a chance to look at and see whether they are going to affect a land drainage area and how we might interact with the design of that application at the time. So we are doing some work around Orchard Road, and we're trying to get that work done prior to an application sort of foreclosing. So there is the opportunity to get some sensible design, let them know that the land drainage aspects are critically important, that they do support big business, they do support, you know, up to 60% of our wealth in the country and the income that brings in. So we take it seriously, and we're taking it seriously with any development that comes into those areas. So yeah, it's definitely on our radar at both the strategic and operational level.
You, Robbie?
Yeah, there's been a couple of successful ones in Tiara and Morrinsville. I think we've given back some small catchments back to the TAs so they can do the urban development, and we're not involved in that anymore. So it's just a work. As long as we're talking and working together, these things can be. But it's when one of us will go off on a tangent and start doing something without us being involved, and then there's these bloopers happen where little outskirts areas are being developed that should have had a lot more intensive work put at it before we started developing there. So hopefully in the future, the spatial plan and all those things will all help with that we won't, in 5 or 10 years time, we won't be talking about this because we'll be involved in that document instead. Yes, thank you.
And one of the learnings that came out of it for me, or that's come out of it, is, and it's not intended as a criticism, it's an observation and learning, is that the city allowed the developers to basically go and design things without getting the drainage committees or the ICM staff involved at the outset and coming in late and then you've got developers pushing hard. You know, we've got this, our engineers have done that, and it's been quite detrimental in the likes of Te Kowhai with that. So that's Waikato District's mistake, and I'll leave it at that. Not the cities, but you know, there's been learnings, and we need to work with developers at the outset rather than coming in late in the picture. So, Brendan.
Thank you, Noel. Just anecdotally, going back after the 99 floods in Pukekohe, Franklin District Council put flood designations or flood-prone designations on titles or large swaths of titles of land that prevented further development without proper oversight. Yeah. Whether that's an option for this council and the TAs to do something similar in these areas, if that's possible, maybe.
For those of you who don't, for those of you who don't know, I was on the Waikato District Council for 15 years, and prior to this last election, and I was chair of the appeals committee for the district plan, which we had put out, and the appeals. One of the issues going through the district plan, proposed district plan, was district worked with region, and the region provided an overlay of the flood-prone areas, and so those were put in, and there's an overlay within the Waikato district plan where there's certain specific flood-prone areas. And so my understanding is when these things come up for review with all the TAs, the regional council does already work with them to try and get these overlays. It's something that's more recent than ongoing for a long time, but as things have come up, they're working with it, and so that's very much been put in place in the Waikato district. Yeah, so, all right, back to you, Ruben.
Just to
Oh, sorry.
add to that comment of yours, Noel, Hamilton City Council also has a flood viewer online. Sadly, though, it doesn't cover parts that sit currently outside our boundary, and seeing the impacts from individuals, they are not able to see what might impact right around and beyond that boundary line. So,
That's really
that's something that we might be able to work in conjunction with other councils to be able to give that wider view.
And that just, because I was on the committee with the cross-boundary committee with the mayors and myself, and I think there are 3 others and the mayor from both councils. One of the issues that Waikato District has is an agreement with the city on further expansion, and it's a principal document as opposed to we're going to grab this bit and we're going to grab that bit. And so there's areas identified within that agreement, so that maybe the city could look at linking that, for expansion, in the future, these areas click to this and it maybe cross across to Waikato District, but we can take this offline.
Absolutely, thank you.
Yeah, yep. No, good idea. Okay, Ruben, National Environmental Standards.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess that's just a note in there almost from the last update to say that in terms of NES freshwater consents and that consent process, we've put that on hold. And then as we go through that wetland determination for the consent process, we'll do that on an as and whereas basis. And there's 2 reasons for that. One really is that I guess the key one is that there's more legislation coming down from the government and what that will actually look like. So that process is on hold.
So, yeah, I know Trevor's got this issue, which we'll take the question here, Trevor, or the comments, whether we then put it to another item, wrap it up later.
Just on the National Freshwater Standard, in regard to Lake Waikere West, permitted activities, I want the council to seriously consider putting all board drains declared as a natural hazard works. And I've got the comment from Simpson Grierson, who's the council solicitors. The clearance work would be permitted under legislation 51, which is a permitted activity legislation, if it can be demonstrated that the material being cleared and was deposited as a result of a natural hazard. Now, this natural hazard is critical and is causing or is likely to cause an immediate hazard to people or property. They say in their view, this would only apply in limited circumstances and would not authorise routine maintenance due to a normal build-up of sediment. And so all the issues regarding the dockland and wetlands and everything would sort of disappear if this clause 51 natural hazard work was adopted by council. And I read what the permitted activity clause 51 in this regulation, this is the 2020, natural hazard works means works for the purpose of removing material such as trees, debris and sediment that is deposited as a result of a natural hazard and is causing or likely to cause an immediate hazard to people or property. Now, the battle over discussion is whether there's no such mention of the fact that, is it a storm? Is it an event? Okay, but if we would put in the long-term plan or adopt that the cleaning of all board drains comes under the natural hazard criteria, instantly there's no consents required. In the case of Waikiri West, there was a consent 4 years ago required in December under a lot of pressure. All of a sudden, the ecologist said, no, it's not a wetland, it's a drain. And so no consent's required after 4 years. And so what we're saying is I want the council to interpret, that might be a better word, interpret cleaning of board drains to come under this banner of natural hazard works. And I don't see any reason why it can't be. There's nothing in there saying it's an event, it's, you know, it's a storm, it's a whatever. And natural hazard works comes right back through all these documents. And I want a motion, you know, a vote on it from this meeting or some meeting that we need to adopt that, because instantly we don't need all these discussions with the Department of Conservation. The rules and regulations are there for board drains. It's quite clear. And so we need the council to be in favour and to take the approach that in this case, we have an obligation to the targeted ratepayers to do this. And I don't see why everybody's fobbing it off. And my second point in here is that I want clarification from the Regional Council. The Local Government Act 2002 says that we have right of access. Council has a right of access to clean board drains. Okay. Now we want that confirmed up, because if that's the case, it's the agreement that DOC are signing next week. In Malcolm Lumsden's case, they want $4,500 every time a digger turns up to clean the drain. Every time. I believe we have rules and regulations in place that we can tell them to go and jump in the lake. Now, Mr. Chairman, is it this meeting or the next one?
Right. Now, I've decided to allow Trevor to raise that issue. He holds that position absolutely dearly. I have also taken the opportunity to speak with senior directors in the organisation, 3 of which Trevor has met with, the RUD director, the regulatory, the Tracy May as policy, Greg, and also the chief executive. We've all heard what Trevor's asking. The reality is, the advice that I have is that the correct place, as I alluded to in my chair's comments, was the freshwater, whilst it's been delayed, it's not going to go away. And the issues, Robbie may be raising them on Monday night, how to make it easier to do things. We've got current council lawyers have made a position, and in all things, the council cannot break the law. It's got a legal opinion, which it has shared with those that have asked and been supplied by the chief executive. This is, whilst it's come under this item, I'm not so sure that passing a resolution right now will achieve any more than what's already intended. Is that those comments have been taken on board seriously. Robbie and I are monitoring that. We are working with staff to look at permitted activities and increasing the scope of that. I'm just not sure that today is the day to fight the battle. I certainly don't want to prejudice anything that's going to be signed next week, but I think that's a one-off and it's being dealt with, and that's the best way. To go into a blanket rule in this situation, we need to sit down, and I would rather take the view that we work with DOC and take it outside of the current Waikiri West issue and work with DOC to see if there's ways forward and what processes that they would accept as a general rule, but then on a case by case for a particular site. So there's many ways that we can address this going forward. I actually think maybe taking an action point going forward and bringing the parties together after we get Waikato West off the table. If that's gone next week, before the next committee meeting, is there any way we can get the parties and actually, rather than talking at each other, talk with each other, and is there any common ground? And this may need to be elevated to a higher level of whether it's DOC itself or to the minister or whoever. I don't know, but I know, Michelle, I don't want to put you on the spot. You did push the button. You've withdrawn, and I want to take Waikato West out of it. It's the wider issue of how we progress this in a better way. I don't know. I'll give you the opportunity first.
Firstly,
Just pull that towards you a bit.
sorry, yeah, totally agree. We're confusing the issues here as well. There is two separate things at play, or a number of pieces of legislation at play. So Trevor, what you're speaking about, which is the NES standards under the Resource Management Act, and I think your wider conversation is about the regulation that comes with that in terms of permitted activity standards and those types of things. So in terms of DOC's view in that we don't, that's not our legislation. That's not our, we are a submitter in those processes like anybody else, and we have an advocacy space. We don't administer any legislation around that. That's council's business. Waikato West is a specific example where landowner access was required to do it because it was public conservation land. So like all public conservation land, anybody that wishes to come and do something, they need a form of authority to do it. Unless it's a recreation or some, going for a walk and those types of things provided for. So that's where we got to, was that yes, we need some form of authorization and you need longevity of that to keep and maintain those drains and do what needs to be done. And that is what has been agreed to. And now as of next week, there will be an easement in place to provide for that. So more than happy to talk about how all things work, but I just want to be clear that we won't be able to answer a lot of those bigger questions around regulation because we're not the regulator. Yeah, but more than happy to participate because we do get involved in them too. And we similarly get frustrated sometimes with how things go. So yep, open to do that. But yeah, just want to be clear about the two different things. One was a Conservation Act for Waikare. It's done. Hopefully it's sorted into the future. You'll be able to maintain it and do what's needed. And I don't know if there are many other examples of that around the Waikato. But none of them are coming to this table, or I don't think the other catchment committees tables, they're not
at this stage.
So I doubt there are, or they've been dealt with in the past.
There might be.
Yeah.
So,
Don't have a light for us.
yep.
The T-Head Canal and the Ulster Canal will be one. Yeah, it
So-
goes directly through a wetland.
So the work that's been done with Waikato West will hopefully help with those discussions when they need to be held. So I just want to go to Craig before I come back to you. Craig, is it on this issue?
Yes. My question, Mr. Chairman, is has the Regional Council made a submission to central government in relation to this, or is it intending to?
The rules have changed with the NES. The program has been set back. So, Greg, can you just help out here? My understanding is that we're not in a process to do that yet. But like all things, over time you get to a position where you need to actually raise issues with the minister. And I know Robbie will take the opportunity on Monday night. He's been invited to meet with people.
Yeah, so we do take the opportunities where they arise, where there's legislation being changed, introduced or adjusted. What we're talking about today is simply what we have on the table and what's existing and what we need to do to deliver our work program. But separate to this, we do take opportunities to provide a whole of council view on proposals that come through, and that includes the work that we undertake to support this subcommittee.
So going back, and I do thank you for putting your head above water, Michelle, and speaking on the subject. Trevor, you have the feedback from me directly and from the directors. They've taken on board the comments. there's some merit in what you've been saying. So the reality is they have been taken on board and put into the program. And as time goes by, there will be further opportunities with you and others to develop those further. And so I'm not sure by passing a resolution that we're going to gain anything more from the process that's been raised here. What will be recorded of this discussion? Mr. Expert, thank you, Dave. Yeah, no, come up. So Dave's our expert in process.
The discussion itself will fall under item number 7 on the agenda, which is the work program. Is that where it's fallen from a resolution point of view? We need to be mindful of the scope we can move in within the work program report, or how we recommend out, because we've also got to be mindful of the power of the committee and its advisory role. It cannot, for example, summon a minister, or so a recommendation to integrated catchment in that case may be the way to go to start that ball rolling. So I would make an action point. But in pursuant to the discussion, all of this recording forms part of the minutes. So when you get the minutes, it refers to, and if you want anything recorded in the written minutes, we can do that.
So under the responsibilities, D, other matters impacting the operation, maintenance and the renewal of flood protection and land drainage infrastructure within the above schemes. So to my way of thinking, infrastructure, does that include a drain? It does. So I believe under the terms of reference, we can deal with this, and that's why I've allowed the discussion. The reality is how we record what I think we've already got what you're asking in place, or whether we note that the request has been made, and or we note the request has been made, and further note that the directors of XYZ have met with and have taken this on board. Would that be a reasonable thing to do?
It would be a reasonable thing to note in the minutes. Do bear in mind that the responsibilities of the committee are to a certain extent also dictated around by the powers in the next paragraph that the committee holds in terms of executing those responsibilities. And one of the specific powers of the committee is the path of recommendation back to the catchment committee.
Could it become under an action point, Mr. Chairman, so that we can deal with it? Because I believe there's room there for the council to interpret the natural hazard thing differently.
And look, that message has been strongly heard. So Greg, I'm going to come back to you and probably.
But if an action point, at least we know at some point there's going to be some discussions.
Yeah, well, I just go to Greg, as he's the director of ICM.
So my recommendation, Mr. Chair, is that I think it's a very clear position of some members around this table around wanting to enable our work as much as possible, and to ensure that the work program that I look after is enabled to influence legislation, changes to rules, etc., as it comes about. What it could do is as you said, there is some changing legislation in the wings, and we could provide the committee an update as to what that process is, and the feedback that we've provided.
So really it's for council to take all opportunities to further embedded activities within the ICM space. I'm looking at from what's been asked for rather than turning it around politically and having some different words, you know. So
the reason I'm pursuing this, Mr. Chairman, is 4 years ago the council, without doubt, legal opinion was a consent was required for Waikato West, and then under landowner pressure in the last 6 months, money, it all got turned over because somebody made an interpretation that was different. And so what I mean is that, you know, I keep thinking that council can interpret this a different way. It can interpret this in favour of the targeted ratepayers, like they made the interpretation with the ecologist. And so, you know,
so Trevor, the issue for me is that there's been a big learning out of this, and that is getting the right people involved in the decisions early.
Yes.
And the ecologist was not part of the discussion 4 years ago, but having a senior ecologist brought into the picture. So it's not about necessarily changing the legislation. It's about having the right people. And in most organisations, you delegate down as far as possible to do the day-to-day stuff. There may be instances where senior staff have got to take on board certain things or staff raise it. So it's not until something like this shows that there's, 4 years ago, if we had the senior ecologist, we may have had a different outcome. Now, we can't turn the clock back, but unless we learn from it.
Now, get the bloke to look at this, will you?
Yeah, I know. I used to say to my staff at the court, if you make a mistake, I will live with that, but don't ever make it again. Yeah.
Well, that's all I'm saying is I want a review of this natural hazard business by the serious senior staff,
So
qualified. That's what we need. The interpretation of the natural hazard thing to be looked at by whoever. That's all I'm asking.
I'll go to Brendan, and then I want to go to Greg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the point that Michelle made earlier was very valid. DOC don't make the rules. The guideline for the rules come under the NES freshwater.
Yep. And
it is actually this organisation, it is actually under RUD and under science and policy. That's where the interpretation of the national legislation is where this sort of this debacle has stemmed from. It's not actually DOC's DOC didn't create the problem in the first place. So I think that needs to be noted. I think Trevor's frustration is sort of leading Trevor to look for any type of workaround to try and have a sensible regime whereby Greg's team can actually go about their daily work without having to obtain consent for what is just normal business as usual stuff, such as cleaning drains. So I put it back to you as our councillors to work through with the CE and the directors of the different departments to have a more common sense approach to how those rules, national rules, are interpreted and how council is able to go about its business. And that is the problem here, Trevor. And I don't disagree with you that we need a resolution, that it's taken 4 years to get to where we're at, and we still haven't actually cleaned the drain, as far as I'm aware. That's just an example of our processes. Well, I'd make a suggestion that perhaps the processes at council probably need some high-level work done on them, and perhaps it's maybe there needs to be a working group that you guys as councillors or as our representatives can work towards, because I honestly don't think this problem is going to go away by us trying to talk about it here.
And look, I'm going to probably cut the discussion off because there are things that I can't discuss right now because of, I'm not even going to say why, but the reality is this is all being addressed behind the scenes. Robbie and I have met with a number of people. Pamela, our chair, is over sitting in the back. Pamela Story, for those of you who don't know her, she's a fellow councillor from Waikato district. So there's a number of things going on in the background, and I'm happy at an appropriate time to talk about some of them. Others will become self-evident. But the issue that Trevor has raised is he's been, this is a bit pompous, but he's been granted an audience with 3 directors, which not many people get on the same subject. The reality is all of those directors have taken it on board. We as your councillors have taken it on board. We are seriously working behind the scenes with our staff about processes. And look, I'm incredibly disappointed to know that 4 years ago a decision was made that had we had a senior ecologist, we may have been 4 years further ahead. And we should have been. So your point, Brendan, is well made about process, there has been some serious learnings with this, and I'm not here to criticise the staff, but they have now moved in the direction that ought to have happened, and I thank them for that, and on your behalf, Trevor, and Malcolm's and the others. The reality is, we all make mistakes from time to time, and I don't normally admit that, but because I never do. But the reality is, we all do, and the main thing is we realise what we've done and we go forward and don't make it again. So I think it's at a lot. At some stage, we're going to have to draw a line in the sand and try to say yes, mistakes were made. It's been sorted. It's taken time. It's been now taken on board, and we're going to go forward. So I would like to capture something so that it satisfies your concerns as an action point, perhaps that a request coming that the staff and councillors work together on giving a feedback as to the way forward, where the council sees this subject of Section 51 and the issues surrounding that going forward. That's loosely, but
yep.
Greg,
No,
I see you drop your mouth drop this.
That's a thinking mouth.
I thank you. If we get that underway, I thank you.
Greg.
Can I suggest the focus? I mean, look, it's up to the committee in terms of where they wish their focus to be. For me, it's that the subcommittee wishes to ensure staff remain involved in influencing policy and legislation as it relates to the delivery of flood protection and land drainage, with the objective of delivering a program that is as efficient and effective as possible. And the reason I say that is because, I mean, look, with regard to Section 51, we have received very clear legal advice around our the unavailability of that. What we have done is actually deferred back to the permitted activity rule 46, which relates to specified infrastructure, and that's how we're getting this work done.
So going back to what Greg just said to start with, are you happy with those words? Because we can take them off the tape and put them into to an action point. Is there anyone got any problems with what Greg? Because I don't want to spend all day litigating what words we're going to use, but they seem to capture the intent of what you're trying to achieve, Trevor.
I just refer back to which is the Simpson and Grierson thing here. The clearance work would be fitted under Section 51 if it can be demonstrated that the material being cleared was deposited as a result of a natural hazard and is causing or is likely to cause immediate hazard to people or property. Now that can be interpreted in various ways. I wanted it interpreted in favour of the targeted rate bar. Full stop.
Okay.
And I believe council have interpreted it in a 120% risk-proof way that nobody will question it. And I disagree with that. We have to, using some of your sort of terminology, we have to push these sort of points in our favour until we're proven wrong. And I don't believe that's the case. And it's quite clear there. It's quite clear that there's wriggle room. And Brendan has said it. We have to be in our favour. Nobody's breaking any laws. But there's room for interpretation, and we want the interpretation to the targeted rate bar. Okay. I think that's the end of it. For me.
All right. So, Adam, I want to close this off. Have you wanted to say something, or are you dropping out?
I was just going to, if I can, Mr. Chairman, just to close this out. I hear what's being said. I think what we're talking about is a general, what Greg's trying to convey is the general interpretation of what that natural hazard terms means under the NES. The NES is on hold for now. We do have this other opportunity with the freshwater review going forward that we talked about at the start of the meeting as well, where we talked about the role of this committee. I think we want to make sure that we streamline the processes so we're not talking up another action that's going to send us off on another tangent. So we've got clear legal advice, Mr. Chairman, but we also just want to make sure that we are working and representing the interests of the activities that we work through with the legislative framework. And I think the way the motion is captured there, we can work with that. Greg, I don't know if you've got any further input. Just want to round it off.
Let's cut it off. I think the issue for me now is that the question is that the committee asks council to review its interpretation of the position and cut it off at that. So can we do that as an action point. Does it need to be a resolution, Mr. Expert? No. Thank you. Now, I do want to get to the long-term plan stuff because, yeah, okay. Yes, and I'll move that we receive that report. Thank you, Sarah and Ruben. So thank you.
Seconder.
Thank you, Robbie. All in favour? Did you want to still say something, Robbie?
Nah, I was going to talk on Trevor, but
we can do that after next function if we need to. Okay, so now we go to the long-term plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'll introduce this for the committee. So this is a more substantial paper for yourselves to consider following our initial discussion in December. The long-term plan itself is at the stage now. Council actually agreed yesterday to a consultation document to be audited. Next decision for council is to agree for a consultation document to be consulted on, which is the end of March, with a consultation period during April. What we are aiming to do here is enable this subcommittee to provide thought and feedback on aspects of the LTP that are relevant to the work program that we undertake. And you'll see on page 37 of your agenda, I've outlined the various aspects which are relevant. The infrastructure strategy, the budgets that have been put forward, some areas of further investment that council is proposing, and a couple of other additional topics there. So, Mr. Chairman, just looking at time, what I'll propose to do is do a brief introduction on each of those topics and pause for any particular areas of discussion. What I'm interested in is the degree to which the subcommittee wishes to get further involved in providing feedback on the various elements I cover off, because there are opportunities to do that not only through the C submission, but also through the normal public consultation process, which is underway. So starting with the infrastructure strategy, and I'll just pick up on the comment that was made earlier by Will around levels of service and where things are at. The infrastructure strategy, it is a 50-year strategy for council. It covers our flood protection and land drainage infrastructure. And for a number of years, council and the community has recognised that our infrastructure is under a lot of pressure. We have environmental changes that are coming through. They're changing the operating environment. We have land use changes. We have changing expectations. We have increased costs. And so it's putting a lot of pressure on the work program, the affordability of the work program, and how we need to plan for it in the future. What you'll see in the infrastructure strategy that has been proposed, and it is a proposal at this stage, is an acknowledgement that actually we do need to look at doing things differently. We do need to have some conversations with the community around major renewal projects that we have on the cards, because ultimately when we're making infrastructural investments, it is a commitment by the community to 30, 40, 50, even maybe 80 years to service that infrastructure. That infrastructure is serviced by the income that's generated by the community. And so it is a long-term conversation. What you'll see in the document, I've provided the full infrastructure strategy to you, but if I refer to page 47 of the agenda, at the bottom you'll see some pie charts, and those are only indicative. But what they are communicating, I guess, is that we do need to make a transition as a council. It's certainly not a flip the switch and we change our approach completely. But we do need to start moving in a direction where we're having a lot more in-depth conversations with our community around what we do when our infrastructure requires renewal, a lot more broader consideration of the different options that we need to think about. That will then enable council and effectively the community to agree actually what is the best approach going forward for various pieces of infrastructure. So it is a really important document. It is strategic, so it doesn't dive into the detail. Our detail comes with our regional asset management plans, our capital programming, etc. But what this document does do is signal it is proposing a signal from council in terms of where we're heading. And something that is important for this committee as well, because ultimately this is about working with the community, enabling the kind of conversations that need to be had, and landing at some good, ultimately some good investment decisions, because we are talking about multi-million-dollar program here. which is funded by the community. Mr. Chairman, look, there's a much more detailed document provided from page 46 onwards, which is an introductory report and the infrastructure strategy itself. I won't dive into any more detail other than to signal those key points earlier. I'm happy to pause there if there are any particular points of discussion that the subcommittee wants to raise around the infrastructure strategy.
So you've got two reports there, Greg. So you've got the long-term plan and the infrastructure strategy. So are there any questions? Chris?
Yeah, I sort of had a quick mention to you, and one of my concerns was reading here, and you're sort of saying retiring a lot of land. As a fellow, an old council used to say, death by 1,000 cuts, because as you retire land, well, that then makes the next stage up, that then becomes, can't support it. And so all of a sudden, before you know it, it's not worth doing anything. So it's a conversation that it's almost like giving up, to even read that, because we've had years and years of forebears have done all this hard work, and then it's like now, well, it's just too hard to continue, and that's sort of what I'm reading. I know there's a lot of cost, so I sort of that's probably my biggest concern, is the fact that it's not just written once, it's throughout the document. That it's in there, and there's some other things as well, but that's just something I really urge to have some support against that.
One of the questions going forward is, should we continue to do the same thing? And we've got to ask ourselves, is what we're doing the right thing to be doing at this time or going forward? So we have to look forward, to look back, and to project our way forward. So doing nothing or building more infrastructure that pumps more water away, fighting against potential sea level rise, and I'm not someone who claims climate change, but I am someone who accepts cyclical or whatever. I'm not going to get into that, but the reality is things are happening out there, and I'll just acknowledge Mike Scarsbrook from our team there, and Mike's listening in on this discussion and may contribute at some stage if that's the intent, Greg. So, I think, Chris, we can't bury our head in the sand and say it's okay to carry on as we are, because it's not. There are areas in the region that are lowering. We've got to look at our way we deal with peat, and there's a program in the LTP to deal with that, or to investigate and look at options of how we go forward. And I'm not sure whether that's Mike's time to come in or not. No. So yeah, I understand where you're coming from, but the reality is big picture. So, Greg.
Yeah, and look, I'd reinforce a couple of points, is that the document is not saying this is what will happen. What it is about identifying the kind of discussions that we'll have to have and consider. The other key one I'd say is that this isn't just about one particular element of sustainability. This is looking across the economic side of things, the environmental side of things, the social side of things. It's that full range that makes up what is a sustainable practice. And I think it's really important that it is simply signalling, and I know in a couple of areas, the community are ready to have these conversations about actually what makes sense going forward. In some cases, it might actually make financial sense to look at retiring some land. In other areas, it might actually make sense from a sustainable point of view to stay the course with infrastructure. Those are the kind of outcomes that will come from this more in-depth conversation with the community. It's ultimately what we're not wanting to do is set the community up for an unaffordable future.
Yeah, because just looking at the LTP, our debt in this council is going from 30 million to 120 million at the end of 10 years, and a large part of that is ICM debt. So, we can't. I'm concerned about our grandchildren, as we probably all are. The debt that they will have to pay that we've incurred. So, I'll flick over to Matthew.
I come from the Mangatapu Drainage District, and for those who are familiar with the Mangatapi Drainage District, you'll realise that if you take a wetland and you just neglect it, it can turn into an unholy mess that damages water quality. I'd just like to make the point that nature-based solutions can be really expensive too. That's got to be balanced against the costs of drainage.
I think Greg's really hit the nail, if you haven't grasped it, is that this is about promoting discussion about where we are going. And I'm very much in the camp as to do the same old is not a good thing to do. When it may be after you've done your review to carry on, as Greg has alluded to, but to do nothing now and just carry on and putting more pumps in or bigger pumps or lowered pumps or whatever, is it really the right thing to be doing? So it's about having that conversation, a mature conversation, not an emotional one. So Brendan, to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I don't think the tone of that paragraph is actually designed that way, but Greg, I think you would agree that when we talk about having conversations with the community, well, it depends what you mean by the community, because if you're talking about private property and when we say, well, shall we retire a paddock? Actually, that is a private property right, I presume, if we're talking about a paddock on a farm. That is, that community probably needs to be really focused on those affected landowners, in particular, rather than when we just say the community. So whether it's a targeted community in a situation such as that, yeah, I absolutely would agree on that. But, you know, I'd hate to think that community meant just going out to all of the ratepayers saying, well, what do you think? Our rates are too high. We need to lower our rates, so therefore we're going to put less effort into these schemes. And if the affected parties, such as the direct landowners, lose their land, well, maybe they'll just have to convert it to a wetland. So in my view, that would be a very unfortunate outcome if that's where it ended up. And, you know, I think without going into any politics too much, but, you know, from 2017 until last year, that could have been the direction of the government of the day. So, you know, that's partly why we saw the changes to NES, freshwater, and NPSFM 2020. We saw a lot of regulatory, I wouldn't even call it creep, I'll call it leap. There was a leap, if you like, in terms of regulation, which has caused councils and ratepayers all over the country a lot of headaches, and some of that will take a bit of time to unwind. But if the principle is there should be respect for private property rights, I think that should be something that we're very mindful of. Now, those engineering solutions, whatever they are, they will be value judgments by all of the affected stakeholders.
So just on that point of view, this current LTP has got several $1 million allocated. That's the proposal. It'll obviously be determined post the hearing and the council's decision, but we've got several $1 million there in investigation in relation to peat. And it's not about, well, let's start again. The investigation or the work, as I understand it, in my words, is that it's looking to find practical ways that you manage peat so that it can sustain the use, be it horticulture, be it dairying or whatever, going forward. A question I asked in the deliberations or the development of this was, are we looking at the end game at creating rules which may lead to certain lands not being able to be farmed and whatever? And the response, and I'll paraphrase again, is that is not the intention, but it is possible that some of that work might end up being taken forward as rules once the outcomes are known. So I did have some reservations, but this work is primarily focused on finding the best ways to use peat. I'm talking particularly about peat only, in a way in which we can continue to use that to benefit the community and food production. So I've supported it on the basis that it's to find better ways as opposed to putting rules that prohibit or need retirement or whatever. Pragmatically, it'll be the landowner because, you know, if it becomes wetter or whatever through inundation or whatever with sea level rise and all those other issues, the land value will diminish anyway, and the economics of it will have to be determined by the individual landowners. So I do not see and do not think that councils should be buying land off landowners to retire it. Government has got some sort of schemes going at the moment with affected areas after Gabriel and the likes, but I don't think that's comparable. So the intent here is with that infrastructure discussion strategy is about promoting discussion, and we've funded some research. So Robbie, do you want to jump in here as the chair of ICM?
I'd hope that we can come back in a group informally and discuss this further, because in the LTP, you guys need to have your input into this, and it doesn't have to be in ICM at all. I think we can come together, just myself and Noel, in a private meeting and discuss what your concerns are and make sure you put them forward in the LTP. And I think that's the most important thing you can do.
Craig, can you stand, because no one can see you? Sorry. And I'm not suggesting you're short.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Craig, sorry, hang on. Sorry, Craig just hang on a minute. Just had a thought that yeah. Okay, Craig.
Yeah, a couple of questions. And within the 50-year plan, if you look at what's happened in Pete and the Waikato in the last 50 years, you extrapolate another 50 years of that, there's going to have to be major adjustments and an awful lot of infrastructure. And if the costs really need to fall where they're going to fall, and as you said before about the market will take care of quite a lot of the value, because some land's going to will be able to sustain its production for food production, but at a cost, and there'll be some that'll become probably unviable to farm in 50 years' time.
Yeah.
So within that long-term plan, I'm very interested in what's happening in the research and the modelling as to where and how that's going to be handled.
Craig's got as I said, I think at the very first meeting, Craig's got a very strong interest in peat soils. So, yeah. Well.
Yeah, thank you, Noel. Yeah, looking at this 50-year plan, I mean, for me, it's quite defeatist. It seems hardly a strategy, because it's basically surrendering basically up to 50% of the assets in the Waikato by year 10 to 30.
So can I just hold you there? This is, as Greg said before.
I know it's signalling, but
it's these are things that may happen. It's not that they will happen, and it's not council policy that's where we're moving. It's so
yeah.
But carry on, and I'll come back to Greg.
Yeah, and I agree with the market. I mean, obviously, as long as the regulatory burden is as minimal as it can be, the can-do attitude of the direct payers farming their property. I mean, if it's viable, it'll carry on, and if it's not, it'll go back to wetland. So I guess we don't want to I guess signal that we're going to basically give up on up to 50% of protected lands in the next 30 years.
And so there will be an opportunity to submit on the strategy as part of the LTP. So I'll be honest, I supported it. In fact, I even moved that we put it out there for discussion, because I want to promote the discussion. I'm not promoting an outcome, but I want to promote the discussion. So, sorry.
Mr. Chairman, how long do we have for these discussions? Like
so the long-term plan is going out for consultation about beginning of April. We've got a date, 1st of April or something, not?
Yeah, it's the first week of April.
First week of April. So, and then it's open for 3 or 4 weeks for feedback. And then there'll be hearings before council in May, June, and then the decision will be made in June, and the impact on rates, etc., come into effect on the 1st of July. So there's other issues in the LTP that I would like to talk about, but not under this umbrella. There's going to be 1 or 2 shocks for you guys.
Robbie, you'll be around in the next month maybe, or yeah, so we can get to with Brendan and some of these guys.
No, we're fully here. That's why I said that. Like, this discussion can't happen here all day, but we're prepared to take this offline and work with you guys to help you to present something to the community and to as a submission to the LTP. Okay, that's
bearing in mind that Robbie and I can't be part of any resolution or otherwise, because otherwise we take ourselves out of the LTP. So we can sit there and answer your questions and whatever and help you as far as we can, but there's a line we can't cross. Otherwise we have to put our hands up and say we've been involved in this and we can't make a decision on it. So be careful what you want us to do. Do you want us in the room or do you want us in helping you?
Oh no, we're helping you, but maybe Brendan, we can meet at Pukekohe or something with all the guys.
Yep. Greg.
Yeah, I think it's just important to reinforce. So so Will, you're referring to the charts on page 47 of the agenda. The diminishing purple, I suppose, is the one you're referring to. That's certainly not a case of giving up. What it is saying is that we do need to think differently and consider very closely what we do with the future of that infrastructure. That's what's signaling, and it, as I said, it is not preempting any particular outcome. It's more signaling the kind of thorough conversations we'll have to have with the community about where we head with some of these major renewals. The reality is a lot of our infrastructure is coming to the end of its life. It will require expensive investment, and so we need to make sure we make the right decision. And in fact, it's making the right decision for the community. That is the priority. The other thing I would point out is, so Brendan, you made the point around the community consultation aspect to it. What we are doing right now is developing an engagement approach to support this work. This will be coming to council at the end of this financial year. And so it's one that we're testing to make sure it does strike that right balance, because your point's understood.
Is there any further questions for Greg on either paper? And I know you brought Mike down something.
Yeah, so maybe as I said, there's a few points from the long-term plan. Maybe it's best to, before we jump into the budget side of things, we'll jump to some of the additional areas of investment that council's looking at. So I'd like to introduce Mike Scarsbrook. He's our manager for our science team. And what you'll see there is on page 37 of your report, there's a summary of several what we call business cases that council has agreed to propose. They aren't specifically connected to the flood protection land drainage activity, but they're absolutely related, as you'll see from I guess the titles of them. And so what I've asked Mike to do is just give you a very brief rundown on what each one involves, and just allow an opportunity for any comment or discussion points. As you pointed out, there's probably a longer discussion outside of this meeting. We do have a limited time. But it's all right with you, Mr. Chair. I'll pass over to Mike to cover off each of these business cases.
Yep, great. So someone give him a thanks, Mike.
Just in the matter of interest of time, Mr. Chair, I'm happy just to take any questions. I mean,
is there anything you'd like to really highlight though?
I would, because we've had conversations with a number of folk in the room, specifically around Whangamarino and Waikato, and just wanted to highlight that at meetings, I think Mike was there and also Brendan and others, that when we were putting together a response plan to the anoxic events that caused fish kills and avian botulism last summer, we put together a response plan, and Michelle from Docs and also Noel and Robbie have been involved in that. We identified that we needed to come up with a longer term plan for rehabilitation of Lake Waikato and Whangamarino wetland. And that's a piece of work that we're sort of including in the LTP. So that's to develop a a catchment action plan, and there's been folks here will be well aware that there's been other catchment action plans and various works done going back quite a long time in history around Waikato and Whangamarino. That one specifically is something where when we talked previously with you guys in Te Kauwhara, that was something we needed to have stakeholder and, to your point, Brendan, landowner, direct landowner involvement in. And we'll be setting up a new working group for that piece of work. I think we've said we'll have that working group set up by the end of March. So we just need to come out and again, through Noel and Robbie, find the right people to be involved in that. So in the interest of time, Mr. Chair, unless people have got specific questions about those other business cases listed there.
You've all read the papers. If it's self-explanatory, that's fine. It's obviously been well written. If it's not, please ask the questions now. Mike's a busy person, but we do absolutely appreciate him coming down. And just for those who are worried about finance, it's not coming out of the drainage budget. No questions for Mike? Oh, we do have one.
Yeah, everyone keeps talking about wetlands, and then on the other hand, they talk about farming and they talk about climate change and the CO2. But I'm led to believe that wetlands have a high impact of CO2. So you're saying, we're getting better by getting rid of trying to stop farming. This is a trend that's coming out. It's not just here, and yet wetlands are being propagated and saying that's the thing to do. But as far as environmental, that's not necessarily better. And so it's it's a catch-22. So what you're promoting one thing, and you're not telling the benefits and the negatives of one. You're sort of showing all the negatives of one side, and then your benefits the other. But you're not actually having it's not an equal playing field.
Yeah, I think that is a really important point, and that often comes through in discussions around greenhouse gas emissions. And obviously the council's been hearing, we've had a lot of information and evidence coming through around the greenhouse gas emissions from peat soils. We have to present a full picture, and that's really the scientist's role to present a full picture. So if we are thinking about addressing greenhouse gas emissions from peat, we have to think about other soil types as well and what's happening there. We need to think about afforestation and different types of afforestation. So I absolutely take your point about, we need to provide a balanced view of, the costs and benefits of these different things. So if we took farming out of a catchment and, for example, increase the area of wetlands, what would the pros and cons of that be? And I think that's part of the issues and options stuff that we want to progress in the Whangamarino Waikato project is getting to the heart of. So if there are specific actions that we would be recommending to get better outcomes, what are the pros and cons, and test those in some detail.
Sarah.
Page 41 of the agenda. So you can see there's a head of proposed business cases, and the one that Mike's spoken to on the Whangamarino is there under point 30, as well as some of the other business cases there as well.
Mr. Chairman, if I might just add a couple more comments to some of the other business cases, just there might be some curiosity from members around particularly the review of funding for critical infrastructure. So I guess that's recognising is it's a continuation of comment around how we do currently fund our infrastructure, what's happening around the country, what kind of changes are we seeing in the, I guess in the operational environment that has influenced that funding policy that we have, and looking at, what kind of changes may we need to make as a council moving forward. So this is a piece of work intended to inform the next long-term plan, to really give council a good foundation for considering how we move forward. And it's connected to what I talked about earlier in terms of some of the affordability challenges but also the reality of who benefits and who contributes to the need for infrastructure. That's going to be a really important one going forward. The C, understanding and adapting to natural hazards. So that's really supporting those conversations we talked about earlier, is actually talking with communities around, it's not an infrastructure conversation, it's actually how do we manage our flood risk in some of these areas? What's the best approach going forward? Yeah, as Sarah said, there's a lot more detail from page 41 onward.
Michelle, you did want to speak. You're okay?
It was just Mike, I think, answered it quite well. If I was just going to make a comment, it was just to look at the opportunity that comes with this too. You know, there's a massive resource sitting there in terms of that wetland and the lake systems. But to do what's right here and probably what's right for what's needed on your land and your businesses as well, you need to just jump up a level and have a good look at what the future looks like in the long term. My sense is these business cases are promoting that discussion and giving the place for that to happen. So that we can plan for the future and have some direction, and everyone can have a bit of certainty about their livelihoods and the environment and.
Sure. Just the discussion is 30B, the review of funding. We refer to these 4 pictures on agenda page 47, where status quo, rada. When you do that review, would you be able to have a pie chart and somehow rather somebody come up with how much of that pie we think central government should pay? Finally put in place, because we all know it's huge benefit to the general public for a lot of this infrastructure. And so, we've talked about it in the past of council's always down, and Robbie, you'll be bashing their ear on Monday night or whatever about more funding. But, to start the process, we're nice to have a scientific pie chart to say, we think 20% should be funded by central government.
We're going in stronger than that. So
well, it's just a figure. But what I mean is we need to start putting down, like you've got the pie charts here for this thing, start saying so that it's out there every single meeting. Well, we've got this pie chart. You tell us what's right or wrong, rather than just talk. That's all. Thank you, Mr.
So one of the issues that I've been advocating, Trevor, is that the community at large requires farmers or primary industry to improve the standards, particularly of water and the likes. So at what cost to the landowner? And if the community has a say and demands and an investment in food production so that they can be fed, is the funding 100% by landowners going forward the right way to be doing it, or should there be a community input into the benefits achieved through appropriate drainage and flood controls and the likes? So rather than floods are generally not 100% targeted rate, but the issue is, and I'm trying to get that wider conversation within council because I think it's appropriate. There is division within the farmers on council who one says I'm a high country farmer, so I don't care what goes on because it doesn't affect me. But the reality is, going forward, can this community produce the food that it needs? And it's a wider discussion, and everybody has an investment, in my view. So I don't want to use the chair's position to thump my case, but the reality is it's another thing that needs to be discussed widely.
But Mr. Chairman, I think what I'm getting at is that having a paragraph of words is great, but the effect you've seen on these 4 pie charts here about future forward for assets and that, I think if these sort of similar pie charts are dropped into the exact discussions you're having, to say we are saying this much, that's up for negotiation, but these are very effective, these sorts of pictures.
Yes.
And I think those sort of pictures, if you've got a figure, Greg, and I don't really want to know what it is, but if you have,
you can know 60-40.
Well, these sort of things should be in the face of politicians and that, because they understand this sort of stuff. Well, I hope they do.
So through you, Mr. Chair, what I can, I'll provide the subcommittee with a copy of our business case. It's in the public arena. And that does that does propose a funding share between local and central government. That may be useful. piece of
So
information.
that's an action. Matthew.
Um, in my early 20s, I used to work for an organisation called the Resource Economics Section of the Ministry of Ag. We used to do cost benefit analysis throughout New Zealand of agricultural projects. And when we used to do that, we analysed the economics in two different ways, one from a national point of view and one from the farmer's point of view. And there was a big difference between the two, because from the national point of view, you take into account the multiplier effect of exports, which are sometimes 4 times, what the income generation of an agricultural project was. And inevitably, the economics was worse from a farmer's point of view and much, much greater from a national point of view because of that multiplier effect. And I think that Greg, I don't believe the Waikato Regional Council does economic analysis from a national point of view, but that's a way to make a case to the government that there should be government funding.
So there is an economic case in that document as mentioned, so I'll definitely send it through.
Yeah, we do have economists in here. You'd be surprised what we have in this building. All right. Thank you, Mike. I do appreciate, I know your time's valuable, but absolutely appreciate you coming down here. And perhaps you've got a context of some of the issues a bit wider than what you came down for. So thank you very much. Where to now?
So,
Mike.
Mr. Chairman, if I'll just continue the long-term plan conversation, it's okay.
All right, so what we'll do is we'll move both reports be received. I'll do that. And Chris will second it. All in favour? Against? Carried. So.
If I refer members to paragraph, we got page 39 onwards, there's a summary of our budgets that are proposed in the long-term plan. So some information there for members.
Did you say 39?
Page 39. Yep.
No. Oh, sorry.
Agenda page 39, sorry.
Yep.
So that provides you with this. So first of all, a summary of our flood protection budgets. And you note there that there have been some specific adjustments which are covered in paragraph 16, which are proposed in particular areas of our schemes. And some further detail around what's gone into the budget. So basically what we do with these, particularly with the Lower Waikato, is we look at the labour resource that's required to run the different compartments and land drainage subdivisions that we have. We look at reviewing that based on actuals to make sure that they are appropriate to the cost of the schemes. And we look at the cash budget that's also required for things like contracted services and materials. So that's the outcome of the budgeting process. Summary of where the budgets currently sit is provided in paragraph 19. I would note that we're undertaking some further work on the budgets and we'll be providing some further adjustments through the C submission to ensure they are where they need to be. This is more around making sure that allocations are where they are directed where they need to be. What else? And there's a summary provided of our land drainage budgets there too. Paragraph 20 provides a summary table. And I'll note an appendix to the report, attachment 3 to your report, which is, sorry, just bear with me. Sorry, just skidding through my agenda pack. So attachment 3 on page 86 provides a detailed breakdown of the subdivisional budgets for land drainage in the Waikato. Yeah. One thing I would point out is that we are doing further work around the operational reserves for each subdivision. Each subdivision does hold its own reserve. What we're looking at is ensuring that for those of you who've been around a while, you may recall that we aim to have a reserve of about 50% of our operational budget. Some reserves are above that, some reserves are below that. We're just reviewing that rating requirement to make sure that, number one, we are able to bring any surplus reserves down to that 50% requirement. Number two, that we're able to lift any deficit reserves up to that 50% requirement, because it is a really important part of our work program, having those reserves for unanticipated work that is required. That's the primary focus, but we are also looking to ensure that where there are other work, where there is other work that's required in the land drainage subdivisions, that is also provided for. And the common example is that where we have capital work that's required, such as a bridge, that we provide a high level reserve to be able to cover that work as it comes up. It's not too common within land drainage reserves, but there are some subdivisions that do have that additional expenditure requirement that we cover. So we're currently undertaking that line by line assessment at the moment to make sure that those budgets are as tight as they can be.
Like to the Freshfield pump on 86, you've got 111 there. Obviously, for replacement or upgrade of the pump, that's why that reserve would be pushing out.
Correct.
Right, okay. Any questions on that?
Yes, please, Noel. Just on number 20, why is the Franklin Waikato gone up 50% where the others have got quite a lot less? That summary, the land drainage subdivision budget.
Ruben?
On page 40.
600 to 900.
Yeah, that's
50% increase.
So I'll provide a general comment. It will be because of the reallocation of our labour across our different subdivisions. And so that brings costs that comes with it. Our labour resource is not changing. But as I said, what we have done is looked at the different subdivisions, looked at where that labour resource goes to, and made adjustments to make sure that it's a fair representation of where the work goes. It's a particular complexity with our budgets because we have 90 odd subdivisions right across the Waikato. Each of those subdivisions is self-funded, has an individual pot of money, and we just have to make sure that each of those subdivisions has the right resource allocated and also the right cash budget.
Mike, you've been waiting a while.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I was just going to ask if maybe when you're putting these budgets together and so forth, self-administered ones, you've no provision in there for actually what funds they actually hold. I mean, I'm just looking at Mary East here, which says we've got $5,200 in the bank. Well, we put in an annual report to the region on what funds we hold and what funds we spent. And I think Ruben can probably attest to the fact that Mary East's funds are way higher than that. So, and I don't know what the other self-administered have got, but I mean, we are looking after our catchment, but I think it probably should be transferred across to show that we are looking after our catchments rather than showing a low level of reserves when we've actually got a high level of reserves.
The Chair, yeah, that's a good point. Actually, I was looking at that today. That we do understand that there is reserves being held, in that area that are not really reflected in that reporting. So we do need to get that reflected just to show the true picture. And there is a bit of work to do around those reserves still, and see what's the real picture is coming through with some of the reallocation of labour. So there is a piece of work to do there to go through and then I guess assess where we're at with the reserves and what's available for, potential rate relief over time.
So the likes of Martin is also showing negative 20,000 on page 86. Talking with Brent Slater, he tells me that they're better off than that. And they've actually asked for an increase so that they can do more work. And with Martingi, it's just about all lifestyle blocks there now. So that doesn't appear to be reflected in proposed budgets.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So with the issue of Martingi, it is one of those areas that is quite difficult. Came across, I guess, from Waikato District. There is a lot of land, rural residential land in there. We, I think in 2022, transferred across $42,000 worth of funding. And this year we've transferred across $61,000 worth of funding. That land drainage has, I think it's 32.8 kilometres of drains in there around that. Now, the normal way that we would build up a budget for the works we're doing for a rural standard, our standard delivery is that we'd be trying to clean 10% of those drains per year and do the spraying of 100% of those drains per year. So the type of metrics we'd use to build up that budget would be that for there's probably the upper end. So per metre cleaning for machine would be around $3. And then your spraying could be around 30 cents. So when you look at that, you can build up a budget as we would to probably $20,000 to $30,000, plus you'd have a $10,000 allowance for any blockages you might need to occur. So I've sort of had those discussions. We've also had discussions with Waikato District about what's their drainage network and what our drainage network is out there. So I am aware that they are requesting a lot more money out to do that. But what we really need that drainage district to do is to provide a work program that looks at what work they want to do per year. And so I guess that needs to be worked on still.
Are you working with Brent or?
We met with Brent and Graham.
Okay, yeah. Graham's supposed to have retired, but he won't let go. So, yeah. Okay, thanks. I'll go to you, John.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, my concern is that you did a lot of work on berm work on the lower Mangawara. Now it was fenced up the top of the berm because they didn't want any grazing on the berm itself. It's now growing a lot of weeds or long grass. They spray the bottom in the drain. The top is, and it's silting up. It's silting in that weed. We're starting to lose the berm again, which is our capacity.
Yes, so I'm familiar with that one, and we did remove the berm material back to the design flood standard through there. If I recall, John, the discussion which was had at the time with landowners is that we do leave it with landowners to, I guess, maintain that long, the pasture through there so that there isn't sediment accumulation. And we'd had that discussion with the landowner where that's situated at the time. I guess it's looking at the cost then back to landowners if we were to then pick up and start actually looking after that across, land as well. Because obviously that's going to have an additional labour cost if we're going in there with a weed whacker, let's say, and clearing that area down, as opposed to if the berms are being managed. I know it was previously, I think, grazed some of that, and obviously there's fencing in there now, but ideally we would like to, I guess, consider where we can leave that with landowners rather than it being an additional labour burden for us to be managing that throughout.
Can I just point out, John, and hopefully we'll have more information at the next meeting, but Robbie and I have been working with Greg on understanding the cost structure. And I've seen some information, some figures, which are not yet in a approved state to be made public or discussed. But there are examples within this building in Karakia. We learnt that for every dollar spent on labour, it costs between $1.60 and $2.20 to deliver that work through the overheads. And we are now much closer to seeing the actual examples of what's costed and how those costs are made up. And I hope to be able to bring some of that to the committee to understand, because some of us have been asking for that understanding for many, many years. And that's one of the issues going forward is how can we sustain that? It was highlighted to me in the Coromandel $300,000 worth of work, but out of $1 million. So don't want to get into details and argue. So we are seriously concerned about how this business operates, and that goes back to the wider discussion is looking at the infrastructure is the way we do things to continue. So, and I also want to keep this at a higher level rather than specific to certain locations. That's a bit operational. We can take that straight to Sarah. So Mike and then Chris, is it the other way around? Chris and then Mike, sorry.
Yeah, it probably goes against some of the points I've said, but I was fortunate enough to go to the Economic Forum, a couple of weeks ago, and one of the issues that's coming before us is capability with aging population, and you sort of did touch on your report, but I think it's something that we all need to be aware of how much automation we can get in systems, because we're just not going to have the people. And so that's something maybe that you need to do a bit of work on, or something to look at, because everyone's getting older, and it's just there's just not the people coming through. There's not the training. They don't want to work. There's a whole lot to it as well. It's not just that we're getting older, but the generation below are more sensible. They don't want to work the hours that we work. So you can't actually growl them for that. But it's a reality. They're looking at life differently than we are. So. I think that's something that we need to look at as well in your thing.
Absolutely, and I guess that feeds into our infrastructure strategy. That's about thinking differently. We're already embarking on what we call a smartification process with our pump stations. So where we have upgrades, we bring in new technology that enables them to be controlled remotely, reduce the amount of labour demand, the safety aspects as well. So there are ideas, and you're right, there are huge opportunities with technology.
Right.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. This is for Ruben. Just one question. Waikato West again. $46,000 in debt. I understand a big chunk of that was to do with the last 4 or 5 years of consent considerations and legal costs and everything like that. And I understood that some of that money was actually going to be paid back. So has that been paid back, and are they still owing 46,000, or is it something to come off that?
Yeah, through the chair, yeah, that is correct. There is some money to come off that. So that journal hasn't gone through yet. And I think
It's
that
not
was
26, is it? It's 27, isn't it?
So through Mr. it's approximately $20,000, and that's in relation to the additional work that was required to deal with some contaminated land around the mill, the drain to the north.
Yeah. All right. Is that the completion of the report?
So yep,
Right.
that's. I did note there were a couple of other minor matters that committee may be interested in. One is around that we are undertaking a separate consultation process in relation to the Karakia water take.
Yes.
And so there's some further information provided there, and further detail was presented to council yesterday on those options. And the other one is just around the disaster recovery provisions. So there's some information there provided, which is basically we have a top up on our rates to provide for zone and regional disaster recovery in case we have impacts such as we had last year.
Lunch is already here.
I'll be quick. I guess one thing I just did want to highlight in that disaster reserve provisions is that the proposal there is to fund that disaster reserve through a 1% loading on flood protection rate funding. And my observation from the recent weather event is that actually most of the cost was actually river management rather than flood protection. Our flood protection assets stood up. There was a bit of cost with response with flood recovery, but the bulk of it actually sat with river management. And when you, from what I understand as well, the regional reserve is funded through flood as well, but we're in we've got 8 zones in the region, and the flood heavy ones, Waihau, and Lower Waikato, are, I guess, paying the bulk into that regional reserve. So I guess I'd just flag that and just give, encourage you to sort of give some thought to that if that's something that you want to provide feedback on. And especially I think as we have more of these weather events, and I guess reflect on those and what some of the impacts, that we're seeing. But yeah, certainly in the Lower Waikato, a lot of impact was actually on those river systems. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you. Nothing further from those reports? I think we received them during the discussion. So if there's no further discussion on those points, I'll close the meeting and ask for, well, before I close, ask for the Karakia closing.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Una here, una here. Una here, mai te uru tapu nui. Kia wātia, kia mama, te nākau, te tinana, te hene naro, e te ara takatu, ko rā e rongo, e whakaaria ake kia ranga, kia tēnā, tēnā humie, huie, tai kie.
Thank you. And I declare the meeting closed. If I'd just like to make a couple of comments and happy to discuss it over lunch. The LTP consultation document, incredibly important that